So when studio execs are making decisions on projects, they're looking to make sure first that something can be marketed, that it's going to be successful, and that they have kind of like a backup plan, so to speak.
I actually think that process it depends what level you are. If you're the lower level development executive on a property, you can probably think that way, but really your job is to make sure that the script is the script and that it's been pounded through and that it's clean and that it reads well and that it's maybe attached, it's good enough to get a director to come on board, it's good enough to get cast, and then as it kind of works its way up the food chain, so to speak, the higher up you go, the fellow who would have, say, the ultimate green light capability, like an Alan Horn at the studio, he probably has to take a lot of input from a lot of different people as to how to distribute it, how to market it, how we will do in various territories. What else do we have on the slate? What else is happening on other slates? So the picture becomes bigger, and the people that work directly with Alan would have that bigger picture. The lower down you go, I think you're better off. You're more effective, actually. You can just limit yourself to what you can actually control and what your decision process should be, which is how there is material. Ultimately, if the script's no good, you're done. I don't care what it is. You're going to be finished.
Yeah, you can't actually do the way I want that.
Right.
Direct the way I want it.
Right. Exactly.
So, and it doesn't present any kind of word of mouth.
Right.
We talked with Jeff Blake over at Sony, VP of Marketing.
Yeah.
And his whole thing was all this strategy about how do you place this movie against this movie. When this one's coming out, we're going to hold off till Christmas because this other movie's hitting, and he's considering. What was interesting was the whole thing of he's not just thinking inside his studio, he's thinking what's happening at this studio, what's happening at the other studio. So
it's a great chess game. Distribution is it's this huge chess game that people play, and it is like moving pieces around, and they have to be very aware of the competition. And, you've seen a lot of times when people will say that they had a very, very good movie and it just got lost on a particular weekend, and there was just no way to resurrect it. And that does happen. It's an art, the distribution. I don't really understand it myself, but I know a lot of people spend a lot of time talking about it.
So let's talk about writing for a moment. Any thoughts on the spec market right now? I know we came out of the strike and there was a lot of sales.
There's some.
Is it still flying?
There's always sales to be had, I think. Coming out of there's always an opportunity for a spec. Specs are, I'm probably am better talking about speccing in television than I am speccing in features because that's really what I do.
Yeah.
I would read a lot of spec features that would be given to me by people who are trying to get into the television business, and there's a whole. Well, for me, what I'd have to do is back up and kind of accept the fact that this is a feature. And a lot of times, as you know, since many of you are working in high concept areas, a lot of times I'd have to negate the language, I would have to negate the situations, the sexuality of it, I would have to negate the violence in the piece because, again, in TV, you have restrictions, and unless you're on kind of like the pay cable areas where you can have a little bit more freedom, but generally what I would then be looking for when I was reading spec, I would not be looking to acquire that material. Again, in the feature area, people do read and they do acquire material on spec, and I don't know what the percentages are, but that should be an interesting question. Maybe somebody who's works 100% in the feature area can tell you that, or in the story department, they probably know best. How much comes in and is acquired from a spec situation versus a commission. My guess is that there's not that much acquired on spec. I think what spec leads to is an introduction of you as a writer, and to show what kind of material you can write probably helps you in the agent market, which I think is very important. And then, once you get a commission and you actually write a script that you're paid for, and that script becomes successful, then all of those spec scripts that you wrote that nobody really wanted anything to do with, you can now sell. Because you become a paid writer. And somehow that material will take on a completely different patina. It's the same script, but it will now be sellable. But I guess the things that always struck me, and which I could probably mention a little bit, is, or at least what I would look for, you always, I want to, like everybody, this is such a cliche, but it is true. It's true of almost everything. I just had this conversation on a musical, which is, the musical better open strong. We have to open with a great piece of music, and some really interesting dancing, and some interesting story and character, because it has to set everything for the audience. It has to set the tone. It has to set the musical style. It has to set the audience should sit back and go, I know what I'm in for. Unless you're purposefully trying to be ambiguous, or unless you're purposefully trying to do something that you're going to reveal later, and then that becomes sort of your hook in. So the opening of any piece of material, when I sit down to read something, I open up that first page. If something just not serious, kind of just jumps, it doesn't mean that it has to be an explosion, literally. It just means that there's something that has to grab my attention. And if it grabs my attention, whether it's a funny piece of dialogue, whether it's an interesting character or situation, whether I'm immediately put into a world that I didn't anticipate by the title, I'm kind of hooked in now. Now I'm going. Now the other mechanics start, right? The mechanics of story structure, the mechanics of character, the mechanics of the MacGuffins, the mechanics of the twists and the turns. I mean, many of you said you're in, horror writing, adventure writing. Well, if it's going to be adventure, then I'm going to start analyzing, I guess, in my mind, how captivated am I by this adventure? How adventuresome is it? Or how cliched is it? If you're an action writer, I used to do a lot of action work, especially when I was in series TV, and I was constantly saying, can't we do this differently? Isn't there a new way to pull and shoot a gun? Isn't there, do we have to go through it? Or if the person puts, this one, I always hated this, and if any of you have in your scripts, I'm sorry. I always hated we're going to give you all the bits and pieces of the story as I'm holding you at gunpoint. All right? Now here's why I did it. And your uncle was actually my brother. And I would sit there and say, just shoot him. Why do we have? If you're gonna shoot him, shoot him. I always say, why? What is the motivation for telling the person that you're gonna kill all of this stuff that only the audience cares about, supposedly? Why is that person doing that? Most people go, well, because we got to finish the story. And you go, okay, I understand, but can't you do that with a little more ingenuity? Isn't there another way to do that? So, I mean, those kinds of things would really kind of stick out.